Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Waiver wire, trades, roster management. To win in fantasy football, you must remember one simple rule. Never get out hustled. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
Tuesday night, beers were cracked. It's like Christmas in July, folks, because it is fantasy football draft season, and you are hustling right here with your boy Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland on the Fantasy Football Hustle, proud members of the Fulltime Fantasy.com podcast network. I am your host, as I said, Brian Drake. Find me on Twitter at Drake Fantasy. The man you are going to get all the information from that's going to make you a smarter, better, more informed drafter is footballguys.com writer Dwain McFarland. Dwain, how's everything going? You were on vacation. Was it enjoyable? Did you enjoy all of the long, great rides at Disney? And did you come back with some Mickey Mouse ears?
My daughter came back with several new pairs of Mickey Mouse ears. I came back with worn out, blistered feet, kind of like Antonio Brown, but from the opposite, like from, heat. No, actually, my feet don't look anything like those pictures of Antonio Brown, it's really gross, actually. But no, we had a good time. It's not necessarily my kind of thing going to, theme parks for multiple days in a row. It's hot. There's a lot of people. I'm not going to lie, Drake. It was getting on my nerves a little bit at the end, but I totally, I respect, the experience, right? It's pretty cool. And the kids, they all liked it. My favorite day was on the way back. We stopped in Destin for a day and a half, just chilled at the beach, had a few brews, listened to some podcasts, hung out with my wife, Amanda. We just chatted. So listen to the waves coming in. That's a vacation, Drake. That's my kind of vacation.
I like that you're listening to podcasts, and hopefully everybody out there is listening to this show, and you can follow it on Twitter at FF Hustle. And if you listen to our show, do Dwain and I a favor, not just follow us on Twitter, follow the show, but go on iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review. That really helps us out, gets more people to find our show. We really enjoy that, and it would make this show just bigger and better and more accessible to the masses. Or if you want to keep it your own little secret, that's fine, because we don't have all the answers, but we've got a lot of good content, and we're going to kick things off content-wise with the Arizona Cardinals. So let's go around the horn here in training camp. And everyone's in love with Kyler Murray. I'm a big fan. I think he's going to have a really good year if he stays healthy, all 111 pounds of him. But all these receivers, Dwain, that they brought in, it doesn't seem like it's meshing as well as we thought. We're hearing that Keyshawn Johnson, the rookie, no, not the Hall of Famer, Keyshawn Johnson is having a really good camp, and he's jumping over guys like Andy Isabella. Now, they also brought in Michael Crabtree this week. He didn't sign. He wants a little more cash than that. But is there signs for concern here in Arizona that so many guys are being shuffled around the depth chart and they're bringing in guys off the street? What do you make of this in Arizona?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's a red flag, and whenever we first went through projections, like when was that, Drake? Like back in June. That's the beauty of what we're doing here. We've been working through these projections for a long time. They've been marinating. We've worked them and talked through these things. And now we get a chance just to react, right, to this information. But we're reacting from a strong baseline. But one of the things we talked about with the Cardinals is a lot of questions. Vegas has them at 6 wins, for a reason. I know that's not exactly what Vegas thinks. They put a line down that basically keeps, that's there to help them make money. But at the same time, it is meaningful. And one of the big holes is at receiver. So we talk about having a rookie quarterback with receivers that are also very young, 3 rookies that they were potentially going to be depending on. Christian Kirk's a second-year guy. Larry Fitzgerald moving outside later in his career. I think this is something to keep an eye on. I'm not moving Kyler Murray down. Of course, I don't have him ranked at number 5 like some people. I just don't see any reason to do that. I also don't see any reason to take Kyler Murray so early. That's a story for a different day. But I think for right now, we do have to move Keyshawn Johnson up. The thing that I'm most concerned about, Drake, is just how often can we truly see 4 wide? Mm-hmm. we know Cliff Kingsbury wants to do that, but if Isabella continues to struggle, Butler's not coming along, and they're having to depend on a guy like Keyshawn Johnson, they may have to be more creative with their formations. They have other players that they can do that with. But I think the biggest thing here is my takeaway is I'm starting to amp up what it looks like for DJ, for Christian Kirk, and Fitzgerald. Mm-hmm. What this is telling me is, at least for now, I gave each of those guys about a 2% bump in target share. So they're slowly, I think their tide is rising a little bit, because I think the other guys aren't stepping up enough to where they're going to be able to demand to take away that many targets. Now, I still don't have it crazy. I've got DJ bumped up. So David Johnson's bumped up to 17%, target share. I had him at 15 before. Christian Kirk is bumped up from 18% to 20%, and Larry Fitzgerald from 20 to 22%. So still fairly balanced, but I'm starting to think those guys truly are going to lead the way.
Going over to the Atlanta Falcons now, where Devonta Freeman is looking like a rock-solid RB2 that you can land in the late third, early fourth, but there's a competition brewing behind him with Ito Smith and Brian Hill. Now, Smith last year played in 14 games, didn't set the world on fire after everybody in the world thought, like, oh my God, he's going to be the man. He's taking over for Devonta Freeman. Only gained 315 yards, had a kind of pedestrian 3.5 yards per carry. What have you been hearing about this backfield? If you're a handcuff guy, behind Freeman especially, you might want to get one of these two guys. How do you think it shakes out?
Yeah, Freeman's the type of back that you want to carry the handcuff, so this muddies things up a little bit. It had been very clear that it was going to be Ito Smith. I don't know how many drafts you've done here in the last few days, but folks are reacting pretty sharply to this. I haven't looked at the latest ADP, but Ito Smith is really dropping. He used to be a 9th round kind of handcuff guy. I'm seeing him last into the 12th and 13th rounds now. So I'm still prioritizing Ito Smith over the rest of these guys. It's just not quite as clear. I think what this does for me, though, Drake, it crystallizes. It's crystal clear. And I was pretty much already there, but this just kind of like seals it for me. Devonta Freeman is the dude. Mm-hmm. And he's going to be in a good offense. I'm kind of to the point now where, we got a couple guys we'll talk about here, in a minute. But right after you come around that, end of your second round, I'm pretty much prioritizing Carrion Johnson and Devonta Freeman. I've even moved them both slightly ahead of Aaron Jones at this point. We'll talk about, why here when we talk about these other guys. But I feel really good. Yeah, Freeman could have an injury, but, so can any running back that hasn't been hurt at all ever. Running backs get hurt every year. So with Freeman, I love the offense, and this crystallizes for me. He should be an early third.
Speaking of teams that run the ball a lot, the Baltimore Ravens are in camp, and lots of good things are being said about Lamar Jackson throwing the football. So he's going to need people to throw the ball too. Since Michael Crabtree and John Brown left town, there's 204 available targets, so they have to go to somebody. Could it be Miles Boykin, who's impressing in camp? Marquise Brown's finally getting back on the board. We like to use FFWC ADP here on this show from fulltimefantasy.com. So when you hear me referencing ADP, that's who it's from, and some of their high-stakes leagues, which you can go check out at playffwc.com. I recommend that highly. So Miles Boykin is going off the board, is basically a free pick. He's 219th. Marquise Brown, you're going to get in the 14th, 15th, 16th round of your draft. So, Dwain, with these two guys, is either of them worth taking a flyer on, and if so, which one?
I think right now, for me, great points by you. Both of these guys are getting a lot of great pub. Boykin is a guy that Matt Waldman, a friend of the show, literally, he really loves this guy. Mm-hmm. He had him in his top 3 receivers in the RSP. So, Matt's a guy that we trust when it comes to player evals. So I'm excited about what it means for Boykin. I do believe that Marquise Brown will be the guy that will benefit more from being schemed, right? As in moved around, motioned, all that sort of stuff. So if I'm taking a flyer, it's still probably on Marquise Brown, because he's the type of guy that on the limited type of targets you're going to see in this offense, because we know they're going to run the ball 50% of the time or more, right? They're going to run it until they can't run it anymore. And so if I'm going to be taking a a flyer on a player from that type of team, I'm going to take the guy with the big play upside. And not that Boykin doesn't have it, but, Marquise Brown is a quick strike player from anywhere. It could be a bubble screen. It could be, a deep shot. It could be a post route. It could be, a slant where he just takes off. So you've always got that added bonus of it could just come from anywhere. So I'm prioritizing him. But if you're in a deeper league, I think Myles Boykin is somebody to pay attention to. I think the guy that, man, the more and more this goes on, the Mark Andrews thing is just, it's a steamroller. It's not stopping. I mean, Lamar Jackson loves this guy. He loved him last year, used him a ton down the stretch. He is the tight end to own. Hayden Hurst is not. Hayden Hurst is the old Delaney Walker in San Francisco when Greg Roman had Delaney Walker and Vernon Davis. Mark Andrews is Vernon Davis. And a couple of those years, Drake, even when they were using Colin Kaepernick and running the ball a boatload of times, guess who got 20% of the targets? Vernon Davis. And down the seams, what did we see from Mark Andrews last year? Down the seams. So this is one of those steady drumbeat kind of things where we saw it at the end of last year. It fits Greg Roman's profile. It's showing up again this preseason. We'll be sure to watch it. Last thing for the listeners, if they haven't heard me talk about this before, I charted every throw from Lamar Jackson last year. And the thing you need to be watching for in the preseason is, can he hit the timing routes outside the hashes, and can he hit the deep throws outside the hashes? He was great down the seams, which is, again, if his strength is Mark Andrews' strength. That's one of the reasons I think we're going to see this continue, is what Lamar Jackson does best is where Mark Andrews operates. And so crossers, deeper patterns down the middle of the field, those are really strong for Lamar Jackson. What we need to see is him work outside of the hash marks more consistently. He was really, really bad in that area last season. His timing was not there. His accuracy was not there. But there's always room for improvement. I'm not saying the guy can't improve, but if you got one thing you want to watch, around, the Ravens this weekend, that's what you should be looking for. If Lamar Jackson is in there at all, that's what I would be watching.
Mark Andrews going off the board currently as tight end 12. You can get him in the 11th round. That is value right there. If you're holding off at the tight end position, really a nice guy to target. I think, though, Dwayne, let me get your opinion on this. If you're going to take Mark Andrews on your roster, are you pairing him with someone else? You can't just have him as your standalone tight end one, can you?
Yeah, it depends on the league and how deep it is. But if it's a deeper league, I'm definitely going to pair him with someone like a Jordan Reed or a Greg Olsen. A guy you don't have to spend a high pick on, but, a guy that, is going to give you, that 500-600 yard floor, to go along with the upside of Andrews. Andrews could still end up being, a frustrating fantasy asset to own because, again, there's not going to be a lot of passes to go around with the Ravens. So you need the guys that are making the big plays. Now, they want to revolutionize the NFL, is what you hear, Harbaugh say. And what he means by that, is if you go back and look at it, last year, Drake, they ran play action 43% of the time with Lamar Jackson under center. No team, since that's been recorded, at least the data I have back through, at least like 2012 or 11, no other team has ever hit that number. There's been like 7 or 8 teams get into the 30% range. The next highest, you know who it was?
Is it anything recent?
It was 5 or so, well, I don't know, time flies, 6-7 years ago. It was a rookie quarterback who blew the league up.
Tim Tebow?
No, that's a good guess. No, but it was Robert Griffin III.
Oh, okay.
RG3 is rookie year when he lit the league on fire.
Drafted him, won my home league championship with Robert
Absolutely.
Griffin III.
39% that RG3 did it. And so you're going to see that a ton. And what does that open up? It opens up the area behind the linebackers. Who's going there? Andrews. So Mark Andrews is the guy to own there. You could still have some up and down weeks because the volume is going to be tricky, but I think he's going to be just efficient enough, and he's going to make enough big plays. And where you're getting him, the 12th tight end off the board, typically, in most leagues, you're getting him anywhere between rounds 10 and 12.
Let's take one team with a shaky quarterback and go to another, and that's up here in Western New York, where Buffalo and Josh Allen have Robert Foster working with the second team behind John Brown. Now, everything I've heard so far is John Brown's having a great camp. He's the real deal. They brought him in. He's their wide receiver 1. But Foster wasn't a scrub. Now, over his last 8 games of 2018, he averaged 14.2 yards a target. That was second only to Tyler Lockett in the NFL. So he was not a bum, okay? You played him, I'm sure, in some DFS lineups. He was really, really good. Do you think he's going to crack this lineup? Is he going to just be a situational deep threat guy? Is he worth even drafting in the next few weeks?
No, not unless you're in a super deep league. And this is one of those, I even put it on Twitter. It's one of those, it's not I told you so, but I told you so. You know, I've had these Buffalo fans coming after me about this for like 2 months saying I'm an idiot. And my point wasn't that I don't like Robert Foster. I do. But they signed John Brown. It's a duplicative skill set of a guy that stretches the field. Now and people were like, well, you're just wrong. He's going to be the 2. No, Zay Jones is the Z who works the intermediate area. Cole Beasley is the slot who works the short area. And then you've got John Brown or Foster that work deep. Now, I think what they realized is that, they may work a few more 4-wide sets in there. I don't see a lot. But I think what they realize is we have to have this element to our offense. So if it's like they have an insurance policy. If John Brown goes down, Robert Foster should be on your speed dial, because then he will be the most valuable asset in the Buffalo passing game. When I remember when this story first broke, and I think we had Jim Day on our show, and we were all kind of bummed, like, oh man, they signed John Brown. We all love Robert Foster. It's a duplicative skill set though, and that really killed Robert Foster. So this, for our listeners, really our longtime listeners, which is kind of weird to say, we've been doing it like a year now. This is nothing new to them. We've been talking about this pretty much since March, that this was going to be the case. So all those folks that were wasting 12th and 13th round picks, sorry, you just should have been listening to us.
And for those out there listening, if you've been listening to us for a while, or if you're brand new, we got an idea here of doing a show listener league. More info on that to come, but just put that in your back pocket. Check us out on Twitter. Again, follow the show at FF Hustle. Follow me at Drake Fantasy, Dwain at Dwain McFarland, spell it DWAIN, and find out some info, because we might be having a draft come up in the next few weeks for all our fun, loyal listeners. Let's switch gears now to go to Chicago, where Anthony Miller's balling out. I remember last year, the guys over at Roster Watch, if you listen to them on SiriusXM, were going crazy left and right over Anthony Miller. And he's got an ADP now of 99. So you're looking at him in the 9th round. For a guy who caught 7 touchdowns, that's pretty damn good value. He's coming off the shoulder surgery, so okay. Let's see him get back in there and stay healthy. I like the Bears offense. I'm not sure about the quarterback, but I like the offense. Thoughts on Anthony Miller? Is that a steal in the 9th round?
I think it's close. I love Anthony Miller. I see me, I do the projection spectrum for, football guys. That's kind of my brand, my thing I do, around projections, which is really tied to different scenarios. I do believe there's a scenario where Anthony Miller leads the Bears in targets. Right now I have him 3rd. I've got Allen Robinson as the lead guy. And then I've got Tariq Cohen slightly ahead of him at 18% of the targets. And I've got Anthony Miller right now at 16%, which is 82 targets, 50 catches, 640 yards, and 5 touchdowns. But again, I believe there's an upside that could be unlocked there. The Bears are going to play a more competitive schedule this year. Actually, if people are thinking about drafting the Bears defense, don't. They play some of the best quarterbacks in the league. As much as I love the Bears defense, it's just not going to be worth it. When good defenses play really good quarterbacks, it doesn't matter. This league is designed to help quarterbacks win, and the screw defense is over. If you don't like it, find a different sport to watch, because that's the way it goes. Anthony Miller, though, out of the slot, is a dynamic route runner. He has a great feel for the game. And, there were several plays where Trubisky, honestly, kind of, he would have, in his limited playing time last year, could have easily had like another 100 and 150 yards and another touchdown or 2 in his limited work, had Trubisky, not airmailed a few of those balls. So this is a guy that just finds a way to get open. And I'm getting him on as many teams as I can. 9th round is a little bit expensive, but and it's not so much that he's expensive. There, you do have some other choices based on the way your roster is constructed. If you need a receiver, take Anthony Miller. I think if you're wanting an upside receiver, that's fine. But typically, I'm seeing him go in rounds 10 and 11, where I'm much more comfortable. If he's there in round 11, I don't let him go by.
A team looking for helper receivers in Cincinnati. where the Bengals are looking to fill in for A.J. Green, who's going to miss first few games of the season. He's a guy who is almost off my draft board at this point. Like, I'm not taking a receiver with a bad ankle. There's just way too many things can go wrong with the tendons in that ankle. Zero chance I'm taking him with a top 4-round pick. Anyways, Bengals were 0-3 last year without him. We know about Tyler Boyd, Dwayne. So are they going to revisit that 12 personnel that they used pretty heavily last year before Eifert and Croft both went down? They got Uzoma. You got Eifert back a little healthier. Is John Ross alive? Who's helping us here in Cincinnati?
Yeah, they're going to have to get creative. They're going to have to do some different things, right? They need John Ross to be healthy. He's not going to play this weekend, but all reports say he's ready. They just don't want to rush him back right now because they're already missing AJ Green. So they're going to wait until next week and ease him back into practice. Now, he's a guy that we know has had a lot of pulls and tweaks, but he's a guy that has talent still. And John Ross is a guy that I've been taking at the end of drafts still. A lot of people have now faded him, which is nice because you can take him with your last pick. And he's also a guy that, great, if he gets hurt again, you just release him in your first waiver run and you go grab somebody else. But he's a guy that clearly, especially for the first 4-6 weeks of the season, could be in line for a very expanded role. I mean, you got a lot of other question marks here. You got Alec Erickson who could jump in. Josh Malone could do some things. Auden Tate, another Matt Waldman RSP favorite. Stanley Morgan Jr. out of Nebraska. He could do some things, but he's mostly a slot guy, which would mean Tyler Boyd would have to work more outside. So Tyler Boyd himself, I think, is fine. You immediately remember this is like you said, it's the Rams offense they're trying to install. It's typically pretty balanced, but I'd given AJ Green 25% of the targets. I'm assuming he at least misses four games right now. So I've got AJ Green down to 20% of the targets, but I didn't just overload all of those to Tyler Boyd. I gave a slight bump to Tyler Eifert, as long as he's healthy. I do think that if he's on the field, Eifert, when he's out there, and I know people are sitting here rolling their eyes at us. Oh my God, but he's never out there. But when he is, he's a really good tight end.
I just took him with my last pick in the Raz Bowl. So like 19th round. The hell with it. The best ball, major upside, give me.
Yes, he's a guy in best ball that I've done about 25 best ball drafts, I think, so far. He's probably on like 5 or 6 rosters. Same type of deal. You get to the end and you throw him on there. So I think Eifert has an opportunity. Uzoma will get a little bit, but I think the biggest folks I'm looking at, Drake, is throw flyers at John Ross and Tyler Eifert at the end of your draft. As far as AJ Green goes, I'm with you. I will not draft him before the 5th round, and even then, I'm pretty much letting him go by because right now at 20% of the targets, even though once you get him back, if he's fully healthy, we know his per game, right, over that stretch will likely be better than some of the receivers we're going to be taking in that round. The risk has just gotten so high that I'm kind of like, I'm willing to go with these other guys because the other thing is if all of a sudden they're 0-4 without him, we could be looking at, the backup quarterback coming in. A lot of things could happen. So I'm with you on AJ Green. I wouldn't take him before the 5th, and I don't blame people if they let him go past that. The only other guy to talk about here is Joe Mixon and Gio Bernard. I actually gave Joe Mixon, a 1% bump in targets as well.
You guys can't see this at home, obviously, because it's a podcast. We have show notes that Dwayne and I can read back and forth. And for the next team, I just simply added to the notes, this is going to be effing insane. And it refers to Odell Beckham and Baker Mayfield and the connection they have. I see it on Twitter every day. They post highlights of Beckham just posterizing secondary guys in Cleveland. He is going to light the league on fire. He's got an ADP of 12 right now. I will gladly take this guy at the end of the 1st round. I think by the end of camp, you're going to see Beckham creeping up into like that 7, 8, 9 range in the 1st round when people are like, I don't want to touch some of these running backs. I'm looking for a major season for Beckham. 15 touchdowns, baseline.
Yeah, Beckham, I wrote an article on my first Projection Spectrum article for Football Guys, and, I worked through all the potential scenarios for him, and there is a very realistic scenario that lives within the 70% likely range of outcomes for him where he's wide receiver 1. I detailed all of the reasons there. If folks want to see it, you can go to footballguys.com and you can read the article. But essentially, Eli Manning was terrible at throwing deep passes. Baker Mayfield was really good at throwing deep passes. This is a Bruce Arians style offense. That's where Freddie Kitchens comes from. Monken is also a stretch the field vertical kind of guy. They're going to unlock. And when you hear people saying Odell Beckham doesn't have a defined role, you can be taking that wrong. What that means is they're just going to use him in every way. He's a playmaker. The other thing I talk about in the article is his application on the football field is unlimited. He can win short. He can win intermediate. He can win deep. He can win jump balls. He can outrun people. He can separate through routes. He can literally do anything on the field, and he can dictate coverage. He does so many things for his team. But Odell Beckham, Drake, I was just looking right here. I'm looking in my best ball draft. You got this little handy-dandy best ball ownership. My number one owned wide receiver of all wide receivers is Odell Beckham Jr. I own him on 42% of my teams. That's 11 teams.
Wow. Might help.
So I'm all in. He and DJ Moore are my top. I own both of them 11 times.
Also might help him that the top corner for the Browns' biggest rivals got carted off the field today. But we'll see what happens with Joe Hayden. All right, Dwayne. We're in Dallas. We're talking about the Cowboys. Zeke with this holdout. I think he's going to get paid, but we have to talk about if he doesn't and who's behind him, okay? You've got Tony Pollard, who I guess could be the next man up. Now, he's a rookie out of Memphis. You might say, wait, I thought Darrell Henderson was there. He was. So he was the other running back in Memphis. Didn't really kill it in Memphis. Had a big. They ran these big wide splits, and everyone's running all over the place. He had 7 yards a carry and all this. In total yards, he still had over 1,000 yards. So he's productive, but Darrell Henderson was the man there. What's going on with this backfield? Is he the guy? Is there somebody else that we should be talking about here in Big D? I'm nervous. I as an Eagles fan, I don't want Zeke to play this year because it's just going to be madness, and I can just shine up another Lombardi trophy. But what's going on here in Dallas? What's your threat level with Zeke holding out?
I think, I'm getting a little bit more worried about it, obviously, by the day. I'm still not, right now we're still early. Each side is volleying back and forth. They're positioning themselves. But, the Cowboys have kind of worked themselves into a little bit of a corner here because earlier in the offseason, you had Stephen Jones come out and say that Todd Gurley's contract was the baseline for what they would do with Zeke. Now he's circling back and saying, well, we're not going to be market setters at any of these positions. That's just not good for the Dallas Cowboys. So we're willing to offer top 5 type contracts to these guys, but no one's going to be a market setter. So that's clearly sending a message to Zeke to where I think we have one of those situations where maybe it started off just kind of being this, hey, let's hold out, see if we can get a little more money. But then, the verbal barbs start flying out. And then all of a sudden you get, there's pride involved. We're human beings. Now all of a sudden Zeke's like, whoa, so I was going to be paid more than Todd Gurley, but now I may get a contract Le'Veon Bell type or less, and I'm younger, and I think I'm a better running back than that. Cowboys, on the other hand, have to be thinking, maybe they just finally, read some sort of analytic piece that said you don't have to pay a running back all that money. And maybe that's what Stephen Jones listened to on a podcast while he was on vacation before training camp and thought, hey, Dad, we don't have to pay running backs, all of this money. I don't know what the hell's going on, but the circling back and forth, it potentially could sour. It could turn into something bigger than we think. So we'll have to see. But as of today, I did go ahead and for the show run what I thought my projections would be. Let's say worst case, Zeke did hold out for the whole year. Mm-hmm. I think Tony Pollard is the guy still to own. He's going to have a role regardless. They love what he does as a pass catcher. He's been rotating in with the ones with Zeke gone, along with Mike Weber. So I think Weber would ultimately be the guy to get the most carries. I would put him at 40 to 45% of the carries. Pollard around 30 to 35%. But I think Pollard's going to usurp most of those Zeke targets. I would put Pollard around the 12, 13, 14% range. So I've got, if this happens, I've got Pollard at 650 carries. We know whoever runs is going to be good behind that line, right? So I've got Pollard, at 150 carries for 650 yards, 4.5 rushing touchdowns. It would be 50 catches, 430 yards, and 3 to 4 touchdowns receiving. So, man, that puts him right at the 200-point range, Drake, which would make him worth, if all of a sudden this Zeke thing keeps going, Pollard is creeping up. I've been taking him in the 12th and 13th round of almost every draft I'm in, just because at that point, if you do hit on this, I mean, that can win you your league because Pollard has upside from what I'm saying here. I'm assuming he's still going to be more of the receiving back, and he'll be complementary to Weber as a rusher. Weber is going to have value as well. They also have Darius Jackson, but I've got Weber at 175 carries, 750 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, 20 catches, 150 yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. So between them, they basically put up, not quite what Zeke does, but they come close to doing that.
I've heard shows lately, and they're talking about Dallas signed Alfred Morris. That's a shot. That's a message right to Zeke. That would be like you're trying to make your wife jealous and you start dating the garbage can. It means nothing. Nobody gives a shit about Alfred Morris, all right? Let's move on from that guy. So
yeah, he's capable behind this offensive line, just because it's such a great offensive line. I just think that Weber and Pollard, as of today, this will be very fluid.
Elf's
this
got
is
no
one
juice.
This is the one you've got to, yeah, but when you have a really good line, they just want the person that goes where the play needs to go because the line takes care of half of it. So you just have to monitor it. I agree that he doesn't have the juice, but juice is quite often very freaking overrated. So it's great when you have a player that has juice and knows how to, and has vision and all those things. Unfortunately, we get a lot of guys that have one or the other. They have no juice and great vision, or they have great juice and no vision. We'll have to see.
Let's go to Denver, where this team has the complete opposite problem. They've got a bunch of running backs with juice, but they have a horrible offensive line. So I don't think this is getting talked about enough, Dwain, where Denver now has a rookie starting at guard. They've got a guy who was playing guard last year and not particularly well, playing center. And they had the 3rd most rushes a year ago behind center. So I'm worried, as much as I am excited about Royce Freeman and the uptick in touches we're seeing from him possibly through training camp. Phillip Lindsay, still a very good player, nothing wrong with him. And oh my God, we just signed Theo Riddick, so let's just screw everything because he's going to catch 40 balls here. How did your projections change when Riddick came in? Is he draftable? What's this mean for the other 2 guys?
Yeah, Riddick's not draftable, but he's enough that he caps Lindsay and Freeman because he's going to probably get a lot of the 2-minute offense work. And with all of the craze that's going on around Freeman, which is being substantiated in camp, it looks like a 50-50 split right now. They're really going to use both of these guys. Well, now all of a sudden, if it's really a 40-40, because Riddick is going to be on the field for 20%, which is maybe, the last 2 minutes of every game, right? Maybe the last 2 minutes before the half. And then anytime they want to go hurry up, or if they're trailing just by a ton, the hope was that Lindsay would be getting that. And so that's what folks need to watch in preseason. Riddick really could just be an insurance policy because they think, you know what, Lindsay's going to be a big part of our offense as a receiver. We need to have another guy because Freeman isn't that. We need to have another guy in case Lindsay gets hurt. He's kind of got a dinged up wrist. Or it could be, nope, Theo Riddick really is the 3rd guy working in. And so the problem for me right now, Drake, with these guys is Lindsay still going in the 4th and 5th round, and he's the more electric player. And, we had Jarrett Moyer was on with us, and we talked specifically about Phillip Lindsay. He loves him for a lot of really good reasons. But right now, I'm scared. 4th, 5th round pick, and he potentially is not going to get those receptions now. You're depending way too much on the big play. Now, I'm still drafting Royce Freeman quite a bit because he's going in the 8th, 9th, 10th round. So I feel like if they're going to be at a 40-40, just give me the guy that's going to go later. And I'm guessing Royce Freeman's probably going to end up getting more work down around the red zone. Again, got to watch this in preseason. So one note on the offensive line, I actually think their offensive line is better this year. And I think their offensive coordinator and their offensive line coach are all better. So I expect the running game and the passing game to be simpatico, working to help build off of one another. Rich Scangarello is a guy that I'm excited, to see in Denver. Yeah, Joe Flacco is, still a little bit of a worry. But I think overall, the arrow is up for the overall running game. You sign Jawan James, you draft Dalton Risner in the 2nd round. their left tackle Bowles, just still hasn't quite done what they wanted. But he did show progress at the end of last year. So you add Noah Fant as a playmaker to work off of the play action and stuff. So I'm overall excited about everything going on, with Denver as it relates to the running game, except for Theo Riddick.
And that line needs to be better because Joe Flacco, if you look at his numbers, when he's pressured, is not a very good quarterback. Let's take the Theo Riddick story and flip it to the other side here. So he's released from the Detroit Lions, and now Carrion Johnson, it's like that Twitter graphic of the little rocket ship taking off. That's Carrion Johnson. Is he now a guy that you're looking at in the second round, and how did your projections for him change in terms of catching the football?
Yes. Carrion, and he hasn't, honestly, Drake, he hasn't moved up enough. He's only moved up people's draft boards 3 or 4 spots. He was going in mid to late third. Now he's going early to mid third.
This is a team that wants to pound the rock.
Yes, we've talked about him. Darrell Bevell wants to run the ball. I did a projection spectrum on Carrion Johnson. This was, one of the scenarios that I laid out. The first step for him to move beyond his median projections was if Theo Riddick's role was reduced by the coaches or released, and that would immediately unlock about a 7 to 8% bump in targets, which he just got. So now Carrion Johnson's at 12% of the targets. That's 63 targets. That's 47 catches, 350 yards. He could do more than that, Drake. He's a really good receiver out of the backfield. I wouldn't be surprised to see him, catch, 55 balls. So again, this is still staying within a conservative range. It didn't do a lot for his carries because I didn't have Theo Riddick with a ton of carries. That really wasn't his role, but it did give him a slight bump. Carrion Johnson up to 60% of the carries. Before I had him at 57.5. So that's 260 carries, 1,150 yards, 8 touchdowns, plus another 350 yards receiving and another 2.5 touchdowns. So, you're looking at a 14 to 1,500 yard guy that's going to score you 10 to 11 touchdowns, and I believe he easily has upside from there.
Let's play a little game here. I'm going to list off other running backs in that ADP ballpark, and you tell me if you want Carrion Johnson over them. Damien Williams.
Carrion Johnson.
Leonard Fournette.
Carrion Johnson.
Aaron Jones.
Carrion Johnson.
Melvin Gordon.
Carrion Johnson.
All right, here's our boy, Nick Chubb.
Man, honestly, that's where I put him. He's in that tier now.
Wow.
So I'm still probably going to take Nick Chubb in the hope that I can pair Chubb with Johnson. Man, I got to tell you right now, every year I fall in love with a certain draft position. Mm-hmm. I always love the middle because you can read the board. But if I'm going to be stuck at either end, and I found a way to draft at both ends, but man, I really love drafting in the first 3 or 4 picks and starting runner, just because I love the receivers so much this year in the 4th through 9th and 10th rounds. You can start your team, Drake, with an Alvin Kamara. Then you could come back with Nick Chubb or even your boy Damien Williams, and then you could turn around and get Carrion Johnson. Man, that's a great way to start a draft.
If you're looking for one of those mid-round wide receivers, you could be looking to Green Bay because they've got guys like Geronimo Allison and MVS who are going in rounds 7 and 8, and they were rounds 13 and 14 just a few weeks ago. So, Dwayne, the question to you is this a little too rich for Valdes-Scantling? I think what we're going to do here is going to watch the preseason and see how it shakes out, but they're going to be on the field pretty much at the same time if Allison wins the slot job. So which guy would you rather have, and is 7 and 8 too rich?
Valdes-Scantling. Allison's falling, and it's rightfully so. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, Drake, where we talked about it on the show, and I actually tweeted this out the next day, and it was one of those tweets where, you get a ton of people, giving feedback on it because it's kind of a hot topic.
That doesn't happen with things I tweet out. I don't know what you speak of.
Well, basically what I said was I was at the point where I'm taking Marquez Valdes. If you put it in a vacuum, I'm just considering everything and really studying this thing, given how much the Packers are likely to run more from under center. They may not be completely committed to 11 personnel, given what Matt LaFleur. Is it Matt LaFleur? Why am I going? Yep, David LaFleur was I'm thinking David LaFleur was the old Cowboys tight end, like from like a 1994 draft. I don't know where that came from. But anyway, Matt LaFleur, the guy didn't pan out. Aikman thought he'd be a Hall of Famer. He never was. So anyway, Matt LaFleur last year ran the two tight ends like 40% of the time. He only ran the 11 personnel like around 60% of the time. McVay runs at 90%. So we got to watch this and see what the Packers plan on doing. I think it's going to be more matchup dependent. So that bumps, I think that insulates Marquise Valdes-Scantling because he's the 2. He's not the slot. He's going to be on the field all of the time. And that alone, and being the number 2 target in an offense that has a lot to give with Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback and a potentially, new, really in a scheme that's going to help Aaron Rodgers, I'm super excited about Valdes-Scantling. And at that time I was even saying, and it was it wasn't happening yet, but my thought process was already give me him over Kuti, easy. Give me him over Curtis Samuel, easy. Give me him over James Washington, easy. All those other guys that are kind of sitting right there, I like him over all of them. And, the community's kind of caught up to that. That's where everyone is at now. And I mean, I don't remember a time, Drake, honestly, this guy skyrocketed. He literally, I think in my first draft, I went back and looked and went 14th in the 14th round. Mm-hmm. Now he's a 7th and an 8th. I've seen him go in the 6th, which honestly is probably about where he should go. He should be going. He's still a little bit undervalued. He should be going where Dante Pettis and some of these other guys are going because he's going to be the number 2 target most likely in a really good offense.
Everyone's favorite bench stash of the past year or so is Devonta Freeman, okay? He's going to come in and he's going to be the man who takes that job finally away from old Mr. No Upside Lamar Miller. Well, he just got released. So he's gone from Houston and hello, Indianapolis, where he'll now be fighting with a big group of random Jags to back up Marlon Mack. So does this mean anything for Mack? Is it an indictment on him? Do they just want to get a little info on one of their rivals? What does happen here?
It doesn't. Now, the coaching staff there are connections with Indy to Foreman and his family. And I like Foreman. This is nothing against him. I just don't see it being something for Marlon Mack. Now, Marlon Mack is a game script dependent dude. And could Foreman be his true handcuff? That's what he could develop into. I don't see him being a guy that's going to steal anything away, from Marlon Mack. Honestly, he may not make the team. So we got to watch this, right? We know last year they were willing to use 3 running backs for a period. Whenever they were in games where they were close or trailing, they were using 3 backs. Down the stretch, when they were blowing teams out, Marlon Mack went off, much like Derrick Henry, very game script dependent. In the big games where the Colts won by 14 or more, Mack went off. In games where they were tight or they were losing, Mack gave you nothing. So you're going to see more of that. Naheem Hines is still going to be involved. But as far as Houston goes, I have seen Lamar Miller in recent drafts start creeping up. And I've heard some people on the air say, oh, it doesn't matter. Lamar Miller's still Lamar Miller. He sucks. He's had all the role. No, he didn't have all the role. Last year, you had Alfred Blue getting 25 to 30% of the work. The year before, you had Alfred Blue getting 25% of the work. So there is the potential that Lamar Miller, sees 60%, of the volume versus like 50%. I gave him a small bump to 55%. It's not like he's a guy that excites us, right, Drake? But he's going to be in a good offense. Everybody loves Kiki Kuti. Everybody loves DeAndre Hopkins. Everybody loves Will Fuller. Everybody loves, Deshaun Watson. Yeah, the offensive line has problems, but this is going to be the best offense that the Texans have put on the field in 3 years.
You can get a starting running back in the 7th or 8th round, a guy who has no competition.
And he's creeping into the 6th and 5th. He and Kenyan Drake are starting to flip spots now. Where Kenyan Drake was going, Lamar Miller's creeping up to. Kenyan Drake is now dropping down a couple of rounds in the drafts I've done in the last 2 or 3 nights. I'm not saying go rush out and draft Lamar Miller, but I gave him 5% bump in attempts. I bumped him from 50 to 55%. I'm giving him 50% of the rushing touchdowns instead of 40. So that's 1,100 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns. I've got him at 40 receptions for 300 yards and a touchdown. That's 225 points.
I heard John McClain, who's a big-time writer down there in Houston, who covers the team, and he talked about how the offensive line woes really affected Lamar Miller. And a big part of that is he always has to stay in a block because they're so poor. And their tight ends always get hurt. So he's staying in the block, and that's kind of limiting his upside as a pass catcher. So if maybe this year they're a little healthier and he can get out and catch some balls, now you're getting just that bonus pass catching work that he never got in the past. We'll see. Behind him is now a big void. Is Demaria Crockett. I don't even know if I said that remotely right, but he's a UDFA kid, and he's getting some love here on fantasy Twitter here in July. Is Diarrhea Crockett a guy that we want to look at here in Houston?
I honestly don't know how to pronounce it either. And,
we're going with diarrhea.
I typically know most players' pronunciation, and I haven't heard of him. I haven't really read anything about him other than what I've read now this week. I've read some comments from Waldman, from Sigmund Bloom, from a few other people on Twitter. It sounds like he's a nice player. I'm not making any predictions right now. They also have Karan Higdon. They've got a guy named Buddy Howell. Josh Ferguson apparently is going to, as of today, sounds like Bill O'Brien likes him to potentially be a pass-catching kind of back. So I haven't put anything down on any of these guys, Drake. I only did Lamar Miller's, and I'm just going to wait, and let's see what happens here in the next couple of preseason games. And honestly, you don't hear me say this a lot, but your guess is as good as mine, honestly, on which one of these guys. I don't think we know enough right now, unless we get an inside beat writer that's really saying this is going to be the guy. What I'm also reading is they still very well could bring in, someone. Who knows? Maybe it's a Jay Ajayi, somebody like that.
That's what I think is going to happen. They're waiting for cuts. They're going to see if somebody's healthy, like an Ajayi or something like that. And they're not making a trade. Nobody's trading away. I got to bring this up for a second. Fantasy Twitter drives me crazy. So everyone talks about, running backs don't matter. They're so replaceable. You can find these guys anywhere, right? Jerry Jones says it. You don't have to have the rushing champ to win a Super Bowl. I mean, they do, but most teams don't. Here's what I don't get. So we're moving off of one running back, and then everyone says, go trade for Melvin Gordon. Why? Why am I going to now have to pay Melvin Gordon and give up draft capital to bring him in when I'm getting rid of a perfectly good back that's already here? Like, it doesn't make any sense. People are idiots, but what are you going to do? Let's go over to
I'm just going to let you keep going with that.
Let's go to the future MVP of the league, Damian Williams, and his ADP is end of the second round, okay? He's been banged up. Andy Reid's a little ticked off. Carlos
End of the second round. Good grief. Damian Williams.
Damian Williams. His ADP, I'm looking at it, is 23.
Oh, Damian Williams. We're talking about the Patriots, though. You're talking about the Chiefs running back now. I'm confused. Are we talking about the Patriots or the Chiefs?
I'm talking about the Chiefs.
Okay, my bad. I thought you said the Patriots.
I said future MVP Damian Williams. Come on.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's having a little tough time getting on the field with that hammy. I don't know if Carlos Hyde's any good. I've never really thought it. You are much higher on him. He's currently going off the board at 115. People are taking shots at Darwin Thompson. He's going off the board 13th, 14th round. Another late flyer, hoping a prayer. Anything with this hamstring changing your already low opinion of Damian Williams?
Hey, my opinion's never been low. It's just been accurate. He should be a mid-third.
Low compared to mine.
Yeah, he should be a mid-third, not a mid-second, just because of the other players you've got to pass, to take him relative, to what they can do versus what he can do. Now, Damian Williams could end up being a top 3 fantasy back. Could it happen? Yeah. But is it likely? I don't think so, and I like him, but I do think you're going to see more of a split between these guys. He's only the most carries he's ever had in a season is like 50.
Yeah.
And we're already seeing him have injury problems. Where he's great is as a pass receiver. So if this team all of a sudden wants to go 70% passing and 30% rushing, and Andy Reid, used to push the edge. He used to be thought of the guy that, oh my God, Andy Reid passes so much. Now he's considered to the rest of the league, he's almost more balanced. But last year, they did get back out there and start flinging the ball around again. Damian Williams is a really good receiver out of the backfield. So that's where I think a ton of his value can come. That's where I've got the most of his value coming. What I like about this injury for Damian Williams is it's actually allowed me to put him on some teams because he's now come around the third multiple times into that mid-late third, right? Where I've been willing to, I even posted that one draft for you, Drake, where I was like, look, Dwain took Damian Williams. I think it was like round 3, pick 4. Totally happy to pull the trigger on him there. Going to take him after Carrion Johnson right now just because I have a little bit more concern about Damian Williams. I would argue that his upside is obviously higher being in the offense that he's in. But I think Carrion Johnson's the more talented player that has got a more, I think, a more stable workload at this point. But they're very close.
All right, just for pure selfishness, I've got Carlos Hyde on my Scott Fishbowl team. So, if it breaks down and Damien Williams doesn't win the MVP and he dies week 2 or whatever happens, I'm kind of cool with that. But, Hey, what can you do?
People have called some on Carlos Hyde, early on and June and July drafts, some of the early things we were doing. People were taking swings on him in the 8th and 9th round. What's funny is his value really should be as high as it's ever been given the news cycle, and he's slipping down in the 10th, 11th, and 12th round. So he's a guy that I'm still happy to grab for whatever reason. People just kind of decided to not really care too much about taking him as much, at least in the drafts that I've been in. I know overall his ADP doesn't show as big of a slip, but it's kind of funny how some of that works. I look at ADP and I'm like, man, I've done 20 drafts in the last however many days, and I never see that. So anyway, moving on. What we got? Chargers?
All right, so what's the value of Austin Eckler? He's currently going off the board at running back 36. You and I talked a little bit before the show about Melvin Gordon. We haven't really expressed a lot of it on the show here. Give me your Gordon thoughts, and then roll that into the Eckler-Justin Jackson conundrum.
Yeah, Melvin Gordon I'm not touching before the 4th round. I don't think he's being appropriately priced low enough. I think there's a real chance. This holdout's very likely going into the season. This is a team that doesn't want to spend the money. This is a running back that's already been offered $10 million a season. Has said he doesn't want it. And look, I get it from the Chargers standpoint. I like Melvin Gordon, but man, he hasn't played a full season. So are you really going to sink all those dollars into him? I just don't see it happening. It could literally be one of those Le'Veon Bell type of scenarios. I don't know that I see an easy out for either right now. They seem pretty staunchly dug in. Now, we're still early. The reason I say 4th round is my spot is because we just talked about one. I'm not taking him over Carrion Johnson. I'm not taking him over Damian Williams. I'm not going to take him over Leonard Fournette. I'm not going to take him over Devonta Freeman. So by the time you get through all those other runners, you're basically looking at the 4th round. When you get to the area where you're looking at a Sony Michel, I probably am still taking Chris Carson over Melvin Gordon. We'll talk about Chris Carson in a minute. But I just don't see the reason to take Gordon because if he doesn't miss the whole season, he's going to miss some time, period. So the flip side to that is Austin Eckler right now going in the 6th or 7th round. If you go heavy receivers early, you could hit a real home run with Austin Eckler. The 6th round this year for me, Drake, is kind of the sweet spot where you can take a swing on an upside runner, and I think Eckler fits into that category because if Melvin Gordon misses the whole year, my projections for Eckler are 160 carries, 65 targets, 50 catches, 440 yards receiving, and 4 touchdowns. His upside, so that's 220 fantasy points. His upside is to be something kind of like Christian McCaffrey, right? Because of the way he works in the passing game. Now, he'll never be on the field 100% of the snaps like McCaffrey because Justin Jackson, I think, is still going to, kind of like we talked about with Pollard versus a Weber type, you're going to have the same thing here. Justin Jackson probably gets the most attempts. 45% of the carries is what I have him at. I've got him at 27 targets, 20 catches. Basically, altogether, I've got Justin Jackson at 780 yards rushing, 7 touchdowns if Melvin Gordon misses the whole season, 160 receiving yards, no touchdowns. So Justin Jackson is a great 10th, 11th, 12th round pick right now in drafts, and he should be moving up more. But Austin Eckler, there's a sweet spot in your drafts right now. Eckler's one of the guys you can think about. Myles Sanders we'll talk about in a minute. He's another. And you can even throw Darrell Henderson, who's now sliding into the 7th because some of this, talk about him still getting comfortable in his scheme. So those are all big upside runners that if you feel really good about your receivers and you just want to lay off, and let's say you start off a draft with 3 receivers. Let's say you're like you mentioned earlier, and I've done it multiple times now where I went Odell Beckham Jr., turned around and went Tyreek Hill or Juju Smith-Schuster, and then you come back and you land a Thielen or a Cooper. You come into the fourth round, man, running back. You've seen it, right, Drake? Running back drops off. If you get lucky, Josh Jacobs may slide around to you. Mm-hmm. Every once in a while, Lynn Fournette will slide around, or a Derrick Henry. But in those cases, you're going to have to take some shots on runner in the 5th and 6th rounds. And I think Eckler, Henderson, Myles Sanders all fit the bill.
Let's stick with Henderson. And as you mentioned, he's trying to get comfortable in the scheme. Some people are saying he's being incredibly overdrafted if you're taking him in the 6th, 7th round. Now, as you stated months ago, and I took him in my Raz Bowl draft, Malcolm Brown is the handcuff to Todd Gurley. And some reports have come out of camp that is indeed the case. If Gurley were to miss time, Brown is going to get the bulk of the 1st and 2nd down work. So, Darrell Henderson, is he being overdrafted? Where should we take him? Is he kind of just like McVay's told us? He's going to be Chris Thompson 2.0, but for the Rams. So you wouldn't draft Chris Thompson in that spot, but why are we taking Darrell Henderson there?
Because it's the Rams, and it's an explosive offense. And as much as Malcolm,
the Redskins aren't?
Yeah, we'll leave that to the audience. I don't want to offend Redskin fans, but no. But yeah, the Chris Thompson, McVay wanted Lance Dunbar. None of these things worked out. Here's my thing. And I wrote about this. If you're an RSP subscriber for Matt Waldman, if you're not, you need to be. You should go subscribe now. And one of the things you get is the monthly newsletter in which I did a full write-up on Darrell Henderson and his range of outcomes and why I believe Darrell Henderson is a value if you can get him in the 6th or 7th round if you understand roster construction. Just because you take a guy in the 6th round that you may have actually scoring less points than the guy that you're going to take in the 7th round because you like the upside of the guy in the 6th, there are strategies to help you do that. And this is one of the years where you can pull something like that off because the receivers in round 7, 8, and 9, as well as the tight ends, allow you to make a play like this. It doesn't work out every year. Some years, if I were looking at a guy like Darrell Henderson, I might be like, no, you just can't do it because the way the board stacks out. This year you can. And I think all those guys I mentioned should be in play. Darrell Henderson, at a minimum, here's the thing with him. Malcolm Brown is only the handcuff. The two guys that are going to get the carries in the games normally right now will be Gurley and Henderson. It won't be Malcolm Brown. Malcolm Brown will close out games to keep Gurley healthy. So if the Rams are winning, they're up 14 points in the 4th quarter. Malcolm Brown's going to come in. That's how he's going to get his carries normally. To your point, if Todd Gurley goes down, Malcolm Brown is going to take over the bulk of those carries, but it's going to also bump up Darrell Henderson. Malcolm Brown won't get them all. So right now, I've got Darrell Henderson. I took Todd Gurley from 65% of the carries, which he had last year, down to 55% because they want to keep him healthy. They've said it. He's still going to be efficient. He's still going to be a borderline RB1. In fantasy, you're just going to have the risk of do they shut him down for periods. With Darrell Henderson, I've got him at 25% of the carries. But if something does happen, you immediately are going to jump to 35, 40%. But 25% on the Rams ain't bad, Drake. I've got him at 500 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns. I've got him at 40 catches, 400 yards, another 3 touchdowns receiving. So, that's, 800 yards and 6 touchdowns, in the role that they're just planning for him.
My brother from another mother, Kenyan Drake, is being pushed by Kalen Ballage in camp. Ballage actually got the first rep of the training camp, and people are going crazy. They're saying, oh, my God, what's happening? Drake's losing his job again. Could this be that, okay, they really want to have a split backfield? Could it be maybe Kenyan Drake's not that good? Or could it be Kalen Ballage is good, and he deserves to get these touches? Ballage right now going in the 11th round. Drake, you're still going to have to spend about a 5th-round pick to snag him. What's going on here in Miami, Dwayne?
Yeah, Drake's really following. It's another deal where if you are drafting, what I've seen with Drake is he's falling. I did a draft earlier today. He fell to the 8th. So Kenyan Drake, that's what we need to see. And if that's the case, you should be drafting Kenyan Drake all day long there. Here's why. I made adjustments based on this report. I dropped Kenyan Drake like 25 points. That's it. Why? Because I already planned on the Dolphins are going to be losing every game. Kenyan Drake is going to be playing the Burkhead / James White role. Who's on the field when the Patriots are losing or in close games? It's the James White and the Burkhead roles, right? If you're in the 2-minute offense or if you're trailing by a lot and you got to catch up, Kenyan Drake's going to be out there. And his value is attached to receiving, which is really what he's good at. So I didn't take his receiving down. I took it down by 1% of his targets. So I've still got 84 targets, 60 catches, almost 500 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. So his rushing, I did bring down. I had him originally at 50% of the carries. I brought him down to 40%. So the problem with Kenyan Drake now is he doesn't have the upside he had before. In a really bad offense, you need more upside to justify that 5th-round pick. But as he falls, as he will, and it's going to happen, as he consistently drops more now into the 6th and 7th rounds, Drake, I think Kenyan Drake is still going to be a value and a guy that you can utilize, in fantasy football this year. Honestly, his points, like I said, they just didn't drop that much. This is actually good news. This just helps ADP. Kalen Ballage, I don't want. He's going to be filling in the LeGarrette Blount / Sony Michel role. What is that role for? Oh, when you're playing ahead or you're trying to run out the clock on a game. When are the Dolphins going to be in that scenario?
Yeah, they didn't schedule the Citadel or Florida International this year like how Alabama usually does.
Yeah. Ain't happening. This team may not win a game. It could be that bad. They're probably going to win 3 or 4 games, but they're really, Drake, look at their roster. What do you like? It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So, you don't want many players from a team like this anyway. It just so happens that Kenyan Drake's going to be more of a value now, and Albert Wilson's a guy we talked about. One other quick note on Miami as well. Gesicki apparently just sucks.
Oh, don't tell me this. Come on. He's another Scott Fishbowl guy.
Yeah, well, Gesicki was at the intersection of, hey, maybe a young, talented guy that's, the arrow could be pointed up. He's going to have volume and opportunity. Sounds like he's struggling and is likely behind Nick O'Leary, Durham Smythe, Dwayne Allen, potentially even. They're all listed as co-starters right now. But for a guy that, they spent a high pick on, It's not looking good. We're going to have to monitor that situation.
All right, let's stay in the AFC East and go over to the world champion Patriots, where Sony Michel's back at practice. I'm not a Sony Michel guy. For whatever reason, there's just people I look past. Brandon Cooks is one. Sony Michel's another. I don't draft them. They don't excite me at all. Supposedly, though, he's getting some looks as a pass catcher. Is this going to increase his value? They still have Damian Harris, who they drafted. They've got James White. Rex Burkhead will never die. Value for Sony Michel versus all these other guys. Where are you taking him?
Yeah, the good news is his ADP has not adjusted really back to his health. But he's kind of a weird guy. Like, I'll see him go in the 4th, and then the next draft he'll go in the 6th. So my answer on Sony Michel is in the drafts where it makes sense for your roster construction, and he's going in the 5th or the 6th round.
Mm-hmm.
I take him. I'm not going to reach for him in the 4th round, though, because you've got Damian Harris, who they drafted. Nothing special, but he's good enough that if Burkhead is hurt or if they cut Burkhead, who knows how they're going to work this. But with them having 4 guys, it's very likely that they keep 3 of them healthy. And that hurts Sony Michel. So I'm excited about what I'm hearing about the pass catching. I'm not going to read too much into it because I heard that back in the day with Stephen Ridley, and it didn't work out. And I remember watching it, Drake, in the preseason. I was hearing this, and then I saw him split Ridley wide in the preseason. And I was like, oh my gosh, they really are going to use Stephen Ridley more as a receiver. Then week 1 got here, and they tried that crap, and Stephen Ridley dropped like 3 balls, and it was over. Now Michel.
It's Jordan Howard. It's Adrian Peterson. It's every one of these backs that go, oh yeah, they're great now. In the offseason, best shape of their lives. They're catching every pass thrown to them.
Exactly.
No,
to be fair, Michel was a decent receiver at Georgia, right? He was more the receiver, and Gurley was more, and not Gurley, Chubb was more the pounder. So it is within his skill set. But for me, I am happy Michel's healthy. I am willing to take him, but he needs to slide into the 5th or the 6th round before I'm going to be willing to pull the trigger. And if I do, I want to get Damian Harris in the 10th, 11th, 12th round if I can prioritize that. He's a guy what's funny is Michel's ADP, and it may be showing that it's rising on some of these. I just haven't seen it in the drafts over the last week. he's just every once in a while he'll go in the fourth, but mostly a fifth and a sixth. But Damian Harris's stock has been sliding. And so it's a viable option that you grab Michelle in the fifth or the sixth, you turn around and now you don't have to spend a ninth like it was 3 weeks ago to get Damian Harris. You can get him in the 11th. So it's a more viable strategy now.
Sony's ADP from the FFWC is the last pick of the fifth round at 60th overall.
Feels right.
Let's go over now to their receiving core. There's 165 open targets now because there's no Gronk. Are we filling them with Phillip Dorsett, Journeyman Maurice Harris, or the new super sleeper that popped onto the scene because he's running with the ones, former NC State quarterback turned wide receiver Jacoby Myers? Now, he played with my man crush, Kelvin Harmon, over at NC State, so obviously I'm a big fan. What do you hear about this guy? Is there any truth to this, that he really could stick running with the ones, or is this just kind of them just rotating guys in and beat writers go crazy? And
I think I think there's rotation going on, Drake, but I mean, I am hearing the same things around Jacoby Myers, and apparently that he and Brady are getting some strong chemistry. So I think you got to pay attention to it for whatever reason, and it's probably to do with intelligence of understanding a complete offense and the way it's supposed to work. Bill Belichick, he kind of has an MO around this. Julian Edelman played quarterback, right, in college. There was a guy, man, I can't even remember it now.
They've got like 4 guys on their roster right now that used to be a quarterback. They're playing another position.
They love it. And there was a guy that used to play for the Cowboys, and for whatever reason, my mind's going blank, but he had been a quarterback. The Cowboys drafted him. As soon as they released him, New England picked him up, and he was a receiver as well. So they kind of have a thing for this. So I think it's still something to monitor. I have not, because you do hear all of them. Oh, Phillip Dorsett has been targeted the most in 11-11s by Tom Brady so far. I believe he's got like 20 targets as of today or yesterday's practice.
He's like the most overlooked guy. Nobody talks about Phillip Dorsett.
Yeah, he is overlooked, so he may be worth a late. If I were to pick a guy right now, if you want to throw a dart at the end of a draft, I do believe it's Phillip Dorsett that you would throw that dart at. Here's the bottom line. Again, it's James White is probably, for all intents and purposes, the wide receiver 2. N'Keal Harry is now hurt on top of struggling, in practice. Now he does face a good corner often in Stephon Gilmore, so some of that can be expected. But I'm still going to put my chip right now, Drake, and it's not that I was super high on the guy in the first, because I think N'Keal Harry has issues that he's got to work through. I think his upside and his ceiling is there. But as a rookie, he's going to struggle with press. He's going to struggle with really running good routes and getting open. He was more of a raw run after the catch kind of guy, can make some back shoulder catches. He can do some cool things, but his application to the NFL field is limited. Like, he can do like 2 of 5 things. And so they kind of have to protect him and move him around. But I still think, based on some of the issues we have with the depth chart, I think you still got to, for now, keep N'Keal Harry as, probably the lead receiver after Julian Edelman and James White. That's the pecking order I have right now. I've got Edelman clearly as the one, and it's not close. Like, he's like 27%. And then I've got James White like right at 15%, and then I got N'Keal Harry sitting at like 14%.
Let's just,
of targets,
for fun here, guys getting drafted according to FFWC ADP ahead of Phillip Dorsett: Deontay Johnson, A.J. Brown, Josh Doxson, Josh Reynolds, Keelan Cole, Equanimous St. Brown, Zay Jones. This is crazy.
Phillip, you're right. Phillip Dorsett should. I don't know if he's better, but he's at least in a better situation right now. He should be going ahead of all those guys. The one problem that I do get concerned with Phillip Dorsett is one of the things he does well is he's got that speed, and we know that Tom Brady's deep ball has deteriorated to some extent. It's not that it's just terrible, but it's gone. It's definitely, he's lost some of that velocity. He's lost some of that touch on the deep ball, and I think that does hurt Phillip Dorsett's potential upside. Of course, that hurts Josh Gordon as well if he comes back.
Another team struggling at wide receiver are the New York Football Giants. You've got Sterling Shepard, who's kind of limping his way back in. You've got Golden Tate, who's suspended 4 games. Corey Coleman blew out his knee, so he's done. I made a joke on Twitter today that if Steve Smith, the former Panther, came back to the Giants, he would literally be like a 6th-round pick in fantasy right now. So
he probably would be.
So with all these guys hurt, what's it mean for Evan Ingram, who's coming off the board at tight end 6?
Yeah, I think early in the season this is really good for Evan Ingram. You know, Evan Ingram was a guy that I was starting to fade because I just kind of saw, and I like Evan Ingram. It's so funny, right? You know, we get these, you know, some folks get it, but some, you know, if you say anything about a player out of context of the whole situation, they immediately take it that you don't like them and you think Evan Ingram's a bum. I don't think that at all. I like Evan Ingram. I love the skill set. I like the potential things you can do with him. My concern is Tate, Shepard, Ingram. You know, Tate doesn't scare me. Shepard doesn't scare me. If I'm a defense, I'm taking Evan Ingram away. He's the guy that scares me. Those other two guys, I like them. They're nice, but I can single them up quite often, right? Neither one of them are true vertical threats. Golden Tate can do it at times, but you're going to need a more accurate quarterback to hit Golden Tate deep. You know, it ain't going to be Eli Manning, and it sure ain't going to be Daniel Jones. So one side tells me Evan Ingram is going to be the focal point of the offense, you know, and he's going to see more targets early on in the season. But the concern I have is I think he's going to be the focal point of pass defenses. It's going to be he and Saquon Barkley. So what I would say, though, is this does bump Evan Ingram up a little bit for me to where now I am willing to draft him. But I'm still a little bit leery because I worry about the bottom falling out, you know, come week 6 or 7 when the Giants have won one game. Eli is not doing well. I don't think that Daniel Jones is necessarily going to provide much relief. Daniel Jones couldn't complete 60% of his passes in college with one of the lowest average depth of targets, like an 8. That's historically bad. And players that have had that type of performance have not translated well to the NFL. My gut would tell me Daniel Jones, I don't know, this is something Giants fans are going to hear it and they're going to hate me. I don't think Daniel Jones will complete like over 52% of his passes this year. It's going to be really bad because college is a lot easier than the NFL. And so now you're going to be throwing into tighter windows against better coverage. It's just, you don't see guys in college that had a 50%, 60% completion rate come in the NFL and all of a sudden complete 65 or 60% of their passes. They go the other way. He's probably going to be around 50%, and that's bad for the whole offense.
It reminds me in a way, and he's a different athlete than these two guys, of Mitch Trubisky and Josh Allen, who were drafted very highly in the first round, obviously. And Mitch Trubisky, I believe, was 2 overall or something like that. And they're just not accurate. And you watch them play, and I mean, even now in Trubisky, another year in the NFL, and it's kind of like, you know, he's just not accurate. He can't hit the receivers. And if you're
Trubisky last year was better than people thought. He did come on down, you know, whenever he was healthy. You know, he completed like 65% of his passes, and his MO was not inaccuracy coming out of college. It was he goes through spells of erraticness, which you still saw, like the air mail pass over Anthony Miller that we talked about. Josh Allen just flat out is inaccurate all the time. Just, you know, on most passes. He doesn't have pinpoint accuracy really on any kind of pass. And I haven't watched enough Daniel Jones to say whether or not that's the case with him. You know, so I don't want to sit here and tell the audience that I have. He's not a quarterback that I've studied a ton. But again, people that I trust, like Matt Waldman, that study this, you know, and put a lot of time into it, Matt Miller, guys like that. You know, Daniel Jones is not a guy that they were high on. I have no clue what Dave Gettleman is thinking. No clue.
Gettleman's an idiot. All right, same stadium, same city, different team. Let's talk about the Jets now. And Robbie Anderson, who's a really good wide receiver, is, as we've talked about before, learning more routes, becoming a more complete wide receiver, and could really be a hell of a wide receiver 3 that you can get in the 5th, 6th round. What are your thoughts on Robbie Anderson and Sammy Darnold, who is a little more accurate? I like him. I think the Jets are pointed in the right direction.
I agree. You know, despite spending some money in some spots that they probably wish that they hadn't, overall, we're still seeing momentum, right? You know, they go and sign Khalil as a center, which he's not what he was, but he's going to help stabilize the offensive line to some extent.
Yep.
They're doing some good things. So When I look at Robbie Anderson, we talked about him 2 or 3 podcasts ago, and we talked about what do you need to be watching in the preseason that could unlock the next level of performance from certain players that we're very interested in. And we talked about Robbie Anderson. And what we talked about is he's got to go from just being a good vertical player to being able to at least unlocking either the intermediate or short area, preferably both, so that his application on the field can be broadened by the offensive coordinator, which it sounds like he's making strides towards doing. What I've been looking for, there's certain things you go looking for with these players. And what I'm seeing are consistent reports of Robbie Anderson. What do you know? Working intermediate, working slant routes, working some of the shorter stuff and getting targets and doing better in those areas. And it's an area where Adam Gase has been very open and called him out and said, hey, we need him to be able to do these things. So we're off to a good start. I am not going to go change things with Robbie Anderson yet. I've got him at 20% of the targets as in a balanced offense. I've still got, Crowder at 19%, Anun, 16, Herndon, you have to drop him down because of the 4 games. So he's down to 11% now, but I got Trevon Wesco at like 8%. So it's a pretty balanced offense, but I do believe if one of these guys has the potential to kind of uncork it, right, and be a 23, 24, 25% guy, it's Robbie Anderson. So we've got to really pay attention. If what we're hearing about in practice translates to these preseason games, so people want to know what to watch for in the Jets, if starters play, you want to see Robbie Anderson's application. Even if he's not getting the ball, you want to watch what kind of routes is he running? Is he creating separation in the drive where he's in?
You were talking to some people on Twitter today about Antonio Brown and where he should be drafted. So he's got this weird frostbite thing going on with his feet, and God only knows what's going on there. Bring people up to speed on your thoughts of where AB should be drafted, and your projection for him. We talked about it before. He's not going to have the depth of target from Carr that he had with Big Ben. So AB, is he still a mid-second round pick for you?
Well, AB was never a mid-second round pick, right, Drake? Since you and I have been really discussing him all the way back to February or March, whenever
his ADP 17. That's why I say that.
No, I get it, but my point being is that he never was even worth that. So he's definitely not worth a late second now. To me, he's a mid-third to late third. Even if he fully heals, I worry about him working with Derek Carr, even if he had all the time in the world to work with Derek Carr. Last year, whenever Amari Cooper was traded to the Cowboys, I wrote an article for the RSP for Matt Waldman. And to do that article, I literally went back and I charted 2 years worth of every route Amari Cooper ran. The dude was open all the damn time. and Derek Carr, if it's not his pre-snap read, forget about it. And it frustrates the hell out of these receivers. And that's why you would literally see them sometimes. They would see the look. They know what's already in Carr's head. And so sometimes they barely would run the route because they know that Carr's a freaking robot. He's either going to that. It's like that first read or bust,
yep.
And or it's the immediate check down. Jalen Richard, where are you? I got to throw it 1 yard, So Derek Carr's got major problems. I'm actually doing an article right now with Mark Schofield, with Jarrett Moyer for the RSP that'll be coming out here in a few days, where I'm doing the data, they're doing the film and the charting work. And it's interesting because it was a science project, Drake. I went and looked at the data, kind of teed it up and threw it out to those two guys and said, hey, this is what the data's saying. And Matt and I discussed it on one of the podcasts, on the RSP cast about 3 weeks ago. If folks want to go listen to it, they can. And they went and actually watched it on the film. And so now does the data and the film all line up, right? And so we'll have an article on that. But in the end, Antonio Brown, if you want to take a shot on him, I don't mind, but don't do it before the mid-third. Don't do it before the mid-third. It's just there's too many other players that are fine. And I get it. Antonio Brown's been amazing. But Amari Cooper's way better than people ever thought. He was open all the time, and Derek Carr couldn't take advantage of it. And so I worry that the same is going to happen for Antonio Brown, and now he's got a foot problem. So I just, for me personally, Drake, I own one share of Antonio Brown in about 30 drafts, and I want to say I got him in like 3.6 or 3.7. And that was a couple of days ago before everything really around the whole foot broke as to what was wrong with it. I just thought it was blisters. Mm-hmm. Now that I hear, it's this frostbite kind of be okay by week 1. If he misses the whole preseason, man, that's going to be a rough start. And I just worry this whole thing could implode, man. I just don't know how he and Derek Carr are going to do. Antonio Brown, mark my words, he's going to miss what Ben Roethlisberger did for him. He may not like Ben the person, but he's going to miss Ben the quarterback.
Last year in that same offense, Jared Cook had a career year. If you've got a late pick, and I've got an article coming out on fightingchancefantasy.com, Sleepers and Busts. Spoiler alert, my sleeper tight end is Darren Waller. So he's got an AC joint issue. It's sprained. He's kind of day-to-day and all this. But this is a big dude. He's 6'6", 255. He is, by all accounts, blowing up in Raiders training camp. So I don't know if you have anything on this guy, but he's going to be my sleeper tight end over at fightingchancefantasy.com in my sleeper bust article.
Yeah, I think he's a solid sleeper, and folks are, man, his draft stock is like rising. I think the injury is starting to slow it. But I mean, I've seen him go ahead of, guys like Jimmy Graham and Greg Olsen and Jordan Reed. I mean, people are getting aggressive with this guy. I think the thing, if you want to watch for it in preseason, he won't play this weekend, so you won't get to see it because, like Drake said, he's got the AC joint issue. We've got to keep an eye on that. We need to see, because Foster Moreau is also a draft pick, we need to see if Darren Waller can be out there in the one tight end set, because he's a receiver by nature. And so if his block, a lot of guys that play that kind of a role, even back in the day, Jimmy Graham, the Saints used to only put him on the field 60% of the snaps because he wasn't a good blocker. And so we've got an offense that's got some potential red flags around it. We need to see how much he's going to be out there, but I'm totally in agreement with you. The guy is an athletic freak. He could. There's a path to him potentially being the number 2 or 3 target on the team. Hunter Renfrow was also named the starting slot receiver. You don't always listen to first depth charts, but anytime a rookie jumps to the top, you do go ahead and pay attention to that. Usually his rookie's getting buried, right, behind the guys like you love, Alfred Morris. But in this case, you got a rookie that's immediately, which no surprise, right? Hunter Renfrow is going to be a good slot receiver. So the problem right now for a guy like Waller is he's probably going to have to rotate time more out of the slot. And if all of a sudden we're seeing know that he's a decent blocker too, I mean, then really watch out.
Another rookie who's rising up the ranks is in Philadelphia, and that's Myles Sanders out of Penn State. And what we're seeing here is the highlights from training camp and beat reporters. And the Eagles have some very good ones and some really shitty ones. Trust me, I'm an Eagles fan. So the hype train on Myles Sanders is chugging down the tracks here. You took him in a couple of drafts, and I remember we had the conversation about it, and you were like, I can take this guy in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, and I know I can sit on him because I can get some floor players later, and then down the road when it's indelibly going to happen, he's going to pass Jordan Howard, and then you say, hey, I've got the running back 1 in Philadelphia on a really good offense. So I know you and I were talking a little bit about this in the afternoon. What are your thoughts on Myles Sanders? I think come November, he's going to be the man in Philly, and he's going to be killing it for somebody who stashed him all season.
Yeah, I think it makes it worth taking him. I hope you don't have to wait that long with him costing, a 6th-round pick, but it's still potentially worth it because, like you said, you can come back and get some floor players and do some different. You've got to build your roster the right way to make a pick like that. But this is a year where you can do it. Preferably what you want to be sacrificing in that round is receiver, because that's what you can come back and hit in the next 2 rounds still and probably be okay. Come back and get a guy like what we talked about with you pass maybe Robbie Anderson to go ahead and who knows how this will totally shake out, but just examples we've given tonight. You pass Robbie Anderson in the 6th to lock up Myles Sanders and he's your number 3 RB. He's your upside flex player for later in the year, but you turn around in the 7th round and you just go ahead and pop Marquise Valdes-Scantling.
His ADP
right now. And then you
now
turn around in the 8th round and you take Curtis Samuel.
I like Curtis Samuel a lot. His ADP right now, speaking of Sanders, is 86. So that's in the 8th round. I guarantee you a month from now, it jumps 2 rounds. It's just it's going to.
It's already not that. It's not that. It's this thing that's blowing up on Twitter. Mm-hmm. I was in a draft last night and he went in the 3rd round.
Wow.
So people, it's a wide range. I'm not saying he goes there all the time. I took him in the 4th with the last pick of a 4th round in my life, just because I don't know how quickly it's going to blow up. So I just wanted to stash him on a couple of teams. Mm-hmm. And I own him on some teams where I drafted back in June and July, where I was getting him, in the 7th and 8th rounds, which I'm pretty stoked about now. But, Adam Kaplan was on, what's the name of the podcast? Sorry, you can do it.
I'll give these guys a good plug. The Inside the Birds podcast with Jeff Mosher and Adam Kaplan is really good if you're an Eagles fan.
So they broke it down. You sent that to me. I listened to it. Adam Kaplan actually did. He's very plugged in. Obviously, both those guys are with the Eagles. He did say some scary words, what it sounded like, and he likes this. He's the most talented back on the team. Mm-hmm. He clearly says that. But what he says is, don't expect him to be the starter, not right away. He actually didn't even say you really ever expect him to necessarily be the starter. He said Jordan Howard's still going to be out there. Darren Sproles is still going to have a role as a pass-catching back, and Corey Clement is likely going to be the jack of all trades. What does Doug Peterson always do? Doug Peterson always uses 3 or 4 running backs. So hearing a guy that's plugged into the team, knowing what he knows, he basically just repeated what we're the most scared about. So with Myles Sanders, I still think he's worth taking. There is a better chance than 0 that he's an absolute 0 for you, because there could be a scenario where all he's getting is 10 touches a week. And it's going to help the Eagles win. It's going to make the Eagles a freaking awesome team that I'm just going to be sick about dealing with in the NFC East. It's happening. It's going to happen. They have a great offensive line. But 10 to 12 touches a week, even in that offense, you're just going to have to figure out, how to balance that out. If we knew it was 10 to 15 every week, you could probably stomach him as a flex player. But when I hear, that 10 to 12 and I got to take him, in the 7th, it's similar to the Darrell Henderson thing. I like what McVay has talked about doing with really more of 2 backs versus 3. So I feel like there's room for Henderson, right? To carve out just a smidge more. I like them both. I do believe that Myles Sanders, he does have a path to where he could become the number 1. Darrell Henderson doesn't, right? Really without an injury. So there's that factor as well. So from that perspective, you could say they're both change of pace backs. Myles Sanders has a bigger upside because, to your point, come week 8, they could just decide, screw Jordan Howard, screw Darren Sproles. This guy can do all 3, and other teams have no clue what we're doing because we've got a 3-down back. That could happen. But you got to watch. I'll just say ball security has always been an issue for him, and I searched 20 articles today, Drake, and 10 of them I found quotes, probably 3 different quotes, but re-quoted over and over. One from the running backs coach and another one from Doug Peterson that were all around ball security, and they're talking about it. So that means, it tells me that that was terrible for him in college. So he's got to figure that out. It is a fixable problem, though. So I do love Myles Sanders' upside. I know we talked about him a long time, but the last thing I'll say about him is what you want to see with Myles Sanders. I don't give a shit about the jump cut from the middle of the field to outside the tackle box, like whoever that Eagles reporter is. He made the wrong cut on the play. That's what's funny about it. And the guy that put the video up has no clue. And it worked out. But in the real world, that typically loses you yards, which gets you benched. And guess what? When Jarrett Moyer broke down Myles Sanders on film, and he put it out there for everybody to see on Twitter, he showed multiple plays where Myles Sanders did the same thing in Penn State. So it's a mistake repeating itself. What I want to see for Myles Sanders is working inside and not making the overcut to try to jump all the way outside. Just make your move to the next hole. It's a progressive thing. It's not, I got to jump 3 holes and show off I'm Saquon Barkley. You know what? You're a good athlete, Myles, but you're not Saquon Barkley. Barkley gets away with some bad habits because he's the elite of – you're not. And so Myles Sanders has got to figure that out. That's what I'm looking for. I want to see him working from one hole to the next, if it's a duo kind of play, I want to see him reading the linebacker on the other side. If it's power, I want to see him hit it up in there. If it's a wide zone play, I want to see him correctly read the outside defender first and then work his way back inside instead of, seeing the outside shoulder there and still thinking you're going to jump it outside. That's a terrible decision. So those are the things I want to see from Myles Sanders.
There might not be a player who's getting as much preseason hype, and I've now fallen in love with officially, than DK Metcalf. Every time this guy goes up and makes a play, it's tweeted about and people go crazy. I'm on board with him now. Looking at that offense, looking at the role he could play with Russell Wilson, I think they're going to throw the ball more. I like Metcalf, and I think they're going to throw the ball a little more now to these running backs, as we're hearing Carson and Penny. They don't really need a third guy anymore. The McKissicks of the world, and who's the other guy? Mr. Glass out there.
Procise.
Yeah, CJ Procise.
Travis Homer, they drafted, yeah. Or undrafted free agent, maybe. Anyway.
With those guys, Penny's behind him. I think Penny's going to have a really nice season. Penny's that ultimate guy, if you have him on your bench, he could win you the league. If Chris Carson goes down, Rashad Penny is a top 5 running back for the rest of the season. So let me get your thoughts here on Penny, Carson, and my new boyfriend, DK Metcalf.
Yeah, so we'll take them in that order. Number 1, Penny. I've actually just downgraded. I just took carries away, and I gave more to Chris Carson because the problems that Matt Waldman has consistently been concerned about, Moyer, and there's other guys, has been his ability to take what's in front of him, and you're continuing to see things in practice where he doesn't. Well, guess what Chris Carson does? He does that. Chris Carson is going to read the hole that's there. He's going to keep things positive, and he's a solid player after contact. I think Chris Carson has a death grip on the lead role at this point. And I didn't think that in the beginning. And now the good news for Rashad Penny is, like you said, if he just keeps his role from last year, which was like 15% of the, or 10, 15% of the work, and he takes on Mike Davis's role, he could have, I did have him at 35% of the carries. I bumped him down to 32.5. I bumped Chris Carson up to 52.5. Obviously you got to leave room for Russell Wilson. So from that standpoint, Penny is still worth the pick. You're right. And a team that's going to run the ball as much as they are, he could still hold really good value for you if something happens to Chris Carson. But Penny has a similar problem to what we just talked about with Myles Sanders. He overcuts, overjumps. Ronald Jones does the same thing. He doesn't operate well with what he's seeing. It's like it doesn't all integrate. What his eyes are seeing and what his processing is saying versus what his feet need to do. It's like it's not all connected. It's just kind of nasty. So he's got to clean those areas up. Otherwise, even if he takes the roll over, he's going to be inefficient. He's going to hit some big plays because that's what you see from these kind of guys, Drake. They don't actually make the right play, but they're just good enough every once in a while that it does pay off.
What's crazy is that their ADP is only 4 spots apart. That seems insane to me.
It's separating. I'm at a point now where I am often in the 4th round because of the way these drafts work, especially if I don't already have 2 runners. I'm just taking Chris Carson in the 4th round, and I'm letting the receivers go by because they're all so even for me. I like Chris Godwin. I like DJ Moore. I like Tyler Lockett. I really like all those guys. So I'm kind of happy with whichever one comes back to me. And I'm just going to go ahead and take Chris Carson because guess what? I'm not that excited about the running backs coming back to me. Now, Michelle could be an option like we talked about earlier in the 5th or the 6th round. But at this point, I like Carson a decent deal better. And I have this team projected to run the ball as much as anybody. I have 494 attempts. I don't see them really throwing the ball more. I see them running the ball just as much as they did last year because Metcalf and Moore are still young receivers. Lockett is really all they have. I do think Metcalf is continuing to make strides. And here's the good news for Metcalf. If he doesn't improve anything else in his game, the thing he's really good at also happens to match exactly with what Russell Wilson is also awesome at and what the team wants him to do, which is press the vertical boundary of the field. And Russell Wilson is the best in the league at deep passing.
He's going to catch 10 jump ball touchdowns this year. Just put it in the bank.
It could happen. I doubt it because the targets are going to be too low, right? His targets.
Wow, look what Lockett did last year. The guy got 4 targets and he had 38 touchdowns.
Yeah, but you just can't depend on it. It's not like – I get what you're saying, Drake. But to say 10 touchdowns, lock it up, more like 6.
Put it in the
there
bank. I wish we had a better sound effect.
Upside is there. Upside is there for 10 for sure. And I actually, Matt Waldman and I discussed this on RSP today. I do believe that there is a realistic way for him to get to 10 that I normally wouldn't think on most teams. I only have him at 40 catches, Drake. I got him at 73 targets, 40 catches because of where he gets targeted so far down the field, 650 yards, but I got him at 6.5 touchdowns. If things break his way, right, and things work out at a better ratio than what they typically do on deep balls, which from time to time can happen for guys, and that's what creates these career crazy years, is you just get a little bit of variance on the plus side. Yeah, he could score, 10 touchdowns. And the good news is they're going to use him to his strength. He's a great best ball player. If you want to draft him in a normal season long, you're going to drive yourself nuts a lot. You're just not going to know when it's going to happen. Yeah. It's going to be the week where he has 4 targets and 3 catches for 100 yards and 2 Ts, and then you're going to be like, I'm going to pop him in my lineup next week. And it's going to be 4 targets for 1 catch and 17 yards.
Yeah, it's tough to have a secondary option on a team that runs the ball that much in your lineup.
The only reason he's even draftable is because Russell Wilson is so good at it.
Mm-hmm.
People – I'm sorry, quick tangent. We got to go. But people continue to underrate Russell Wilson. It's insane. He is the best deep passer in the league over the last 7 years. And guess what, Drake? It ain't freaking close. The guy's putting up record numbers for completion percentages down the field. He's in the top 3 guys every freaking year. Pat Mahomes will challenge him for that moving forward. But we underestimate how good it is. Like these guys like Drew Brees and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, they can't sniff Russell Wilson's jockstrap when it comes to his ability to complete deep passes. Oh, by the way, under pressure as much as anyone in the whole league. The guy's doing this running around like a chicken with his head cut off and still has this accuracy. Oh, when he's under pressure, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. When he's not under pressure, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Whenever he throws the ball quickly, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. When he holds on to the ball longer, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's good in every area. He's a true definition of a quarterback that propels his whole team because he can literally do everything. And the more and more I study him, the more I respect him. It's just crazy to me that some people still think, oh, Russell Wilson, he's okay, but he's just good because Seattle throws the ball. No. He's the reason Seattle gets away with running the ball so much because his passing is so explosive, it makes up for the lack of volume.
What a steal. You can get Russell Wilson, who a year or 2 ago, wasn't he like the number 1 or number 2 quarterback? According to this ADP we're looking at, he's getting drafted behind Kyler Murray in like the 13th round.
Yeah. It's silly. And look, his upside is not to be a quarterback 1. He may not even finish in the top 12 quarterbacks because they run the ball so much, but he's proven over and over that he can do it with very little. And the thing about Wilson is we know what he can do. And you don't have the upside of some of the other guys. But here's the way I look at quarterback quickly this year, Drake, is I don't look at it as, does he make my top 12? Honestly, there's 16 to 17 guys that I'm happy with. So, and I consider them all to be QB1s. Now, I definitely have my top 2 tiers, but once you get past that, there's a group of like 10 guys and Russell Wilson's in it, and I'm not going to push it to take some of the other guys earlier when you can get Russell Wilson in the 12th.
I'm going to skip over the Redskins because they're just a dumpster
they suck.
And let's just talk about the 49ers here. And a guy that we were really high on, Dante Pettis. There's some reports out of camp that he's struggling with drops. He's working with the second team. I'm getting a little nervous here, Dwain. This is a guy I like as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. What's going on with Pettis?
Take the ADP discount. Hopefully this pushes him down, which I am, and I did see this happen in a very recent draft. He fell all the way to the end of the 7th. I unfortunately was on the opposite end, sitting there watching this happen. Pettis is an elite separator. He's having problems with drops right now, and it's concentration stuff. You can kind of reading the tea leaves when you read Shanahan's quotes talking about Pettis needing to be consistent day in and day out. It's a focus thing. Here's the good news. Pettis did not battle drops in college. It wasn't an issue. Pettis didn't battle drops, severely last year. So he's not a guy that has traditionally had a problem with drops. I think he's going through a rough patch in camp. His skills are still going to translate. These other receivers are young. They want to scale back Marquise Goodwin. George Kittle is, your de facto number one receiver. Debo is getting some positive love. Now, what I have been doing, Drake, because I own so much Pettis, is I have been lately, if I don't get Pettis, I've been drafting Debo in the 12th or 13th round. Just, it's a hedge. Mm-hmm. It's a hedge bet. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go back to Dante Pettis. What he does is he's a great route runner. He's a great separator. He did it against Xavier Rhodes. He did it against Patrick Peterson. This guy, he does this stuff against really good players.
I saw people on Twitter saying like, oh, Dante Pettis just stinks. He's not very good. He's doing it all in garbage time at the end of games. And when I watched him, I thought he was a really good wide receiver, and it didn't matter what time of game it was. I mean, look at the quarterbacks he was playing with also, and he was getting the job done.
Yeah, by the nature of game scripts, it wasn't, you can't argue with the fact that some of it came in junk time, but going back and watching it, there's still, when you go watch the plays and you see the separation he creates. So here's what happens, Drake. And this, I love analytics, you know me. But I don't live and die by some of the same metric stuff that these Devy guys get into. Well, he didn't break out by the time he was age 18, and he didn't get 27% of the market share in 2 consecutive years in college. And if you look at all those things, everybody that ever hit those criteria was successful. You're reverse engineering the damn thing, and eventually you're going to run into a problem. There's going to be an outlier. And I know because I used to live by that stuff, and then I figured it out. And those things are great guidelines, but you have to understand that filters things down for you, but you got to go understand the other players' games. I'm going to give you 2 quick things on Pettis, and we can jump. One, whenever you look at his next-gen stats, he is the second best separator for players that didn't play at least 50% from the slot, which gets protected from what? Press coverage. So he lined up against press. He was often in the X, not the Z, meaning he was on the line of scrimmage. He's beating press coverage. He created the second most separation yardage at the time his quarterback let go of the ball of anyone in the league. This is up there with T.Y. Hilton. This is up there with the elite players in the league, and the guy's a rookie. And guess what? That was his scouting profile from the guys like Matt Waldman. So when you see somebody like these folks that know how to watch the film and they've got a great process behind it, and they say, these are the guy's strengths and then why he's going to win in the NFL. And then the next season, you see it on film, and then you have a stat like that from Next Gen Stats basically backing it up. It's just true. His thing that he does really, yeah. Is he the fastest receiver? No. Does he weigh 215 pounds? No. Does he create 3 to 5 yards like on routes? Like, it's insane. He makes people just fall down. He's one of the top 5 route runners probably in the league already. He knows how to get a defender to turn their hips as soon as he gets in their back pocket and they're checking back either shoulder to situate. He's going to break. He's already broke. He's gone. I don't know if you saw that one play I posted on Twitter, Drake, where literally he turned the guy around right away and the guy's already in a trail position chasing him. And then Pettis makes another cut. And while just in chase, this shouldn't happen. If you're backpedaling and you're a defender and you fall, I get it. Pettis literally has the guy just trying to follow him, and his cuts are so good, the guy still falls down, chasing him. So, again, Pettis has an elite talent, and when the stats and the film come together, and then you look at the scheme that he's going to be playing in, I still have faith in the guy. Great. He's having a few bad practices, and they're trying to motivate him. And we have no clue. Guys all the time rotate through second or first team. It happens to everybody, at some point, because they want to give some of the other guys a chance to work. For all we know, they're trying to look at the other guys because guess what? The 49ers are going to have to cut somebody. They've got some receivers, they've got Richie James. They've got Bourne still on the team. They've got Jalen Hurd. They've got Marquise Goodwin. They've got Dante Pettis. I mean, they've got Trent Taylor.
Somebody's going to
they can't keep all these guys. Yeah, so they've got to figure out. For all we know, they're just trying to get some more reps to those guys. So I don't want to read too much into it. Now, does that mean I'm going to completely ignore it? No. I think we just need to monitor it, but I'm not worried about it because it wasn't a problem for him before. It's not like I just don't see it being something where all of a sudden now Dante Pettis just can't catch. It's not the case.
There you go. Folks, that's an hour and 45 minutes
Jesus.
Of just fantastic, in-your-face fantasy content from Dwain McFarland. Find him over at footballguys.com, mattwaldmanrsp.com. You can read my work over at fightingchancefantasy.com. Thanks for sticking with us. Follow the show on Twitter at FFHustle. We appreciate it. We love you. We'll see you next week, folks. Take care.
This has been the Fantasy Football Hustle. We're back next week with all you need for waiver wire, trades, roster management, and more. Until then, never get out hustled.